Hi, welcome on our exhibition ground, on Theben exhibition ground. I want to introduce myself. My name is Elmar. I'm responsible for technical support and training, and yeah, I'm happy, I'm glad to convoy you through the next couple of minutes, introducing you solutions, KNX solution. So do we have any solution, smart solution, however? I think there is probably much more than you expected. So the approach and the idea, what I want to make you acquainted with is finally, so a solution which is called sun tracking. Probably you know, you experience on your own, probably it's brand new, don't know. I want to make you acquainted with. You know the standard. The standard means the automatical shading of buildings, of apartments, of villas, however, means finally you have a sensor, mostly weather station, which measures the current daylight, and when a specific preset value, like for instance 10,000 lux, is exceeded, so then the blind starts running down and positioned to a fixed position. This happens during the whole season, during the whole year. Okay, it's fine, really. Keeps the light out, the sunlight out, keeps the infrared warmth outside, sure, but, or protects about that. But what if it is December? What is in March, in June, July? You know, the position of the sun is different. And when you run down the blinds, so you keep the natural daylight out, and so that means you have to use artificial light inside. And this sun tracking, finally, is a reasonable good option to make such a building perfect, to adopt the slats according to the position of the sun during the season. And I want to make you acquainted. Give me just a couple of minutes. These sophisticated solutions, these are required in modern buildings, requiring automation, requiring energy efficiency, requirement, for instance, as well for the well-being of people working, for instance, in such a building, comfort, for instance, the air quality, yeah, however, good light. And this all is in all these normative regulations, LEED, BREEAM, EN 15232, GBI, UK Gov. All these normative regulations are telling you these are requirements for modern buildings which has to build up in the future. And what is the approach? Finally, you discover here, it's starting here with the automatic shading depending on temperature and brightness. When it comes to the illumination, we talk about these, let's say, constant light control, this sophisticated light control, which is first approach. A pretty good quality of the light permanently all day long. You have the same condition on your table, and on the other hand, a maximum of energy saving. Then as well, air quality control. So that means air quality in terms of carbon dioxide. Yeah? When you have a lot of people in a room, however, there is a normal ventilation required, normal or the technical ventilation required through the ventilation systems, control the dampers, and so on. And as well, there is the heating control or the climate control according to demands. And all these are solutions which we merge, we put all together in order to give you a reasonable good solution in total for a sophisticated building. So first of all, a few insights about, let's say, this shading control, the sun positioning due to presence. First of all, want to make you acquainted a little bit. So what happens, for instance, during June, during March, during December? So you know, the position of the sun varies. There's a difference, sure. So, and when the sun is pretty high, like in June, so then you can open the slats pretty early because the sun is positioned pretty high. In December, you have to close the blinds pretty much because you want to have this dazzle protection. Yeah. So in this adaptation is running fully automatically, and I want to make you acquainted so how to do the setup. Yeah, just a few insights. Yeah, the XXL video we have on our webpage, on the Theben webpage. There you see all the details, where you have to do the setups and what you have to link together in the group addresses. However, precondition is finally you need to have the current time, the current date, you need the position of the building, and you need the width of the slats, and that's it. And this you have to link in an intelligent way together with the weather station, and then you have a genius solution, energy efficient, highly protecting against these, let's say, diesel. However, and finally, we can integrate this as well in a smart climate control. This will come at the end. So the other approach is finally the control, the light control, which we call constant light control. And probably you know that Theben, or the subsidiary of Theben, it's HDS in Switzerland. So they are the founder mainly of the present sensor. Sensors good enough to detect small motions, typing on the computer, for instance, writing something with a pencil, however, and highly sensitive, but there is much more. So these high sensitive sensors can give you as well control commands, dim control commands to a universal dimmer, to a dolly gateway, however, and adapt the light inside according to the current brightness outside. Adaptation, full automatical, smooth and really comfortable, and this is the highest efficiency finally. So, nevertheless, for this as well, we have on our webpage another XX large video of one of our webinars, which telling you more details, more insights about how to do the setup, what you have to consider, and so on. Today, I just scratched a little bit on the surface, but you will discover, I'm pretty sure, at the end of the day, so how you have to merge all these together in order to have a reasonable, efficient result. Temperature and presence, so that means climatization. So that means we want to do the climatization in terms of cooling or of heating control. So the details you will see immediately, and we integrate as well, and this is something which is highly interesting currently in terms of airing, airing control inside of building, in schools, in offices, in public buildings, you know, this virus currently. And so the airing is really essentially, that you have a good airing to control the dampers accordingly, to control, for instance, like here, the ventilation. And you can as well dehumidify or humidify. However, you know, this virus is a little bit sensitive against, let's say, too high humidity. So if you humidify, so you can keep this, let's say, transmission of this virus a little bit under control. Yeah, and what if you put all these together, so the climatization, which you see here, you have the light control here, you have the airing control here, and the shading, and if you put all these together in one solution, so you have, I call it a smart solution or the smarter room, the smarter office, however. So, shading principles. What you need basically, okay, for the manual operation, you need here the push button to operate up down, if you like. You need an actuator, either here the DIN rail or the flush mounted actuator, for instance, or the flush mounted RF, doesn't matter. And you need a reasonable, powerful weather station. Yeah, here our meteor data, and easy to discover. We have here, for instance, easy installation here with this bracket here. Then you discover here the temperature sensor, you discover here the wind wheel. There are different sensors here, and you discover here as well, here is a rain panel. And so all in all, we offer you, or we have the solution here for controlling 8 different facades, totally separate, if you like. It's up to you. So on this weather station is communicating with the system itself. So what you require, on one hand, you need up and down, you need the height of the lamella, and you need the position, for instance, of the lamellas. That's primarily, so there is a precondition finally, which you need in order to have a really good shading control. And our shading actuators, this is the application of the shading actuator, you discover right, is supporting you with the heating and as well with the cooling control, with the cooling support. what is the inside? What is the effect? Patient, I will tell you. So on the other side, you discover here the weather station with the different application settings. You discover here, okay, here is the up and down command, which has to communicate finally here with the actuators communication. We need, sure, here the local time and the local date. Otherwise, the weather station does not know when the sun sets, when the sun rises, and what is finally the elevation, the position of the sun. And we need finally to know, so how is the current situation here? So that means, what does this sensor here measures? So, fine. And this has to be linked together, and that's it. Yeah. And what is the smartness? The smartness of our shutters and blinds actuator, nevertheless, if we talk about DIN rail or if we talk about flush or RF, so you discover here in the application of the shutter blind actuators, heating and cooling support. So you adjust here, for instance, your desired room temperature in an office, for instance, and you preset, for instance, what should be the position when this temperature is not exceeded or not reached. However, let's do an example. Your desired room temperature is 21 degrees, but the inside is currently 18 degrees. What does it mean? Outside, the temperature is probably, so-so, but the brightness is pretty high. So under normal circumstance, the blinds will run down and give you the reasonable shading. But now, due to the fact that the inside temperature is not reached, not exceeded 21 degrees, so the blinds are remaining open. And just in case, when the temperatures are achieved, so then the blinds run down and give you the reasonable shading. Yeah, then you probably might say, yeah, but if I have a conference and I have days that I'm glared by the light, it's not really comfortable. Yeah, but if you link a presence detector, so you enter the room, you are present now, temperature is not achieved, for instance, so then the blinds run down. If you leave the conference room and the temperature is, just as an example, not achieved, so then the blinds run up in order to take the infrared light from the natural daylight to support you to heat up the room. And now it's easy to understand how the principle is and how easy it is finally to understand how the opposite, so the cooling support finally is. So when inside, warm summer day, for instance, sun are shining, so that means the inside temperature is pretty high early morning due to the nice summer day, however. So then, and the room is not occupied, so the blinds immediately run down to keep the current brightness outside and to keep the infrared heat outside. When you enter this meeting room, so then just due to your presence, the slides may open, adapt to the current situation, the position of the sun, and they will adapt further during the daytime, give you the maximum, let's say, shading, yeah, but as well a maximum of natural daylight so that the internal light control can softly dim down, reducing, let's say, the energy which is needed for the artificial light. Okay, you got it? I think, smart solution. And this adaptation runs fully automatically. Yeah. Whenever you are in the room, then the blinds are adapting individually. And here you discover, so what you have to do, you have first of all to set where is the reasonable channel, the reasonable shading position to, westerly side, southerly side, southwesterly side. However, you need the current time, you need the current date, you need these geodata, exactly what I'm talking about. You need finally the run times of the blinds, how long it takes from up to down. However, you need the turn times from the slats. You need the width, the spacing of the flats, width and the spacing. And then, okay, don't forget please to adopt or to adjust the wind speed for security aspects finally, and that's it. Yeah. So a pretty simple solution, pretty simple approach. This is just an insight of the settings. Then when it comes to the heating or to the climate control, here I deeply recommend, especially for public buildings, schoolrooms, offices and so on. So take this one, the FCA, so the fan coil actuator, What is so special? The fan coil actuator is supporting you with the heating control and as well, if required, the cooling control according to the reasonable temperature. The temperature could be measured, for instance, with the Eon 108, which is really a nice eye candy, which is giving you the reasonable room temperature, the current room temperature, and the fan coil actuator is running accordingly. So, and what is the difference between the FCA1 and the FCA2? FCA1 is 3-step control, especially for the ventilation. Yeah, if you have a ventilation system running, so then you can, depends on demand, you can run different stages. Or especially the FCA2 is really a nice product, which is giving you 0 to 10 volt command, especially to control dampers, for instance, stepless. Yeah, it's rather rare in the KNX market to get such. Tapen we have. So, and what is the smartness? You see here, according to the temperature, shading remains open or shadings run down. And if somebody is present or comes in the room and presence is detected, so then the sleds are adopting accordingly. Quite smart, quite clever. So, what is to be added? So this stage control could be adjusted, can send a telegram, bit telegram, can send a value telegram. However, we can as well have an auxiliary relay to be activated in the fan coil actuator if required, especially for the heating support. So if, for instance, in strong winter times, in winter seasons, for instance, in Sweden, Finland, or further up, so and probably the heating system is not powerful enough, so with the auxiliary relay, you can start a second, let's say, register or a second source, for instance, to support the heating if required. You can use this controller as a remote controller. So that means you have here this Eon giving you the reasonable room temperature, or for instance, it is sufficient just to link a room temperature probe. For instance, you take just such a room temperature probe like this here, detecting, measuring the current room temperature, implementing, for instance, with a binary input or with one of our nice flush-mounted actuators, and give this temperature exactly to this fan coil actuator, and a fan coil actuator can control on its own without any remote controller. Quite nice. So this gives a good freshness in the room because of the ventilation. And when this ventilation should start, when the CO2 sensor finally is telling you how is currently the CO2 value, how is the humidity, for instance, and this is, let's say, the kind of referee which is telling the ventilation, okay, now there are so many people in the room, so there is ventilation needed because the CO2 value is increasing. And just to make you a little bit acquainted with, when we talk about, let's say, breathing, natural breathing, so if you breathe, so it is about 400 ppm, so at a, let's say, a good air quality outside, I would like to say, and the exhale, so that means depends on how strong you're working, how your physical strain finally is, can be up to 40,000 ppm. So that means there is a certain factor in between, and so that means as more people are in the room exhaling, so automatically the CO2 value is rising, and what is the effect finally of CO2? For high CO2 value, finally has a certain effect on, let's say, the well-being of the people. Yeah. So if the CO2 value is quite high, so some people are sensitive, starting getting headache, for instance, unconcentration, or probably they get fatigue, so they get tired. However, and due to that, to keep the air condition or the air quality quite in a good level, so it's good for concentration and good for the work, for the efficiency finally itself. So constant light control, the principles. So we have how to describe and how to understand the principle. So we have here our nice Tebrema, the KNX sensor, which is good enough for installation height of 10 meters and above, and up to 3 channels. And if a person is detected, so then it triggers, for instance, the light metering, it triggers the light filtering, if we do, let's say, a constant light control. And this as well, this knowledge, and there are some other progresses which are running in the background, gives triggers, for instance, to switching commands, to give a dimming command, to give a fair value command, for instance, a feedback. You can give these commands as a DALI command or as a KNX command, can, by the way, give a presense command or move direction, depends on what kind of presense sensor it is. So that means the smartness is finally here at the beginning. But what you get is finally the application and the communication which such a controller can give to you. Here on top, you discover here, this is a small insight of a presence sensor. This is a PIR sensor, passive infrared. So the sensors are based on infrared light. So the skin of people are different to the room temperature, for instance. And if I move now, so by the lenses, these moves are detected, give a trigger finally, and then the light metering is getting started on measures finally how the condition is currently, and then starts finally, do I have to start the artificial light to dim up or to dim down how the condition is in order to keep the light really stable, and this threshold has to be set in advance, so as a preset value, mostly 500 lux for indoor applications. However, a highly efficient light control which you can use, and now you got it. So the shading control, adaptation of the blinds according to the sun. So that means if the sun is in June, so the sun is pretty high, so you can open the the position of the slats pretty wide. You get a lot of daylight in. The presence sensor is discovering here, so how the current condition finally is, and you have a good natural daylight, which is for free, and you can dim down finally the artificial light. Energy saving and highly comfortable finally for usage inside of the room. What is required? A nice sensor, yeah. So for instance, Suprema, or the small brother, for instance, the Tironda flat. KNX, for instance, you need a powerful dimmer, which could be either DIN-rail, the DM2T, or the flush-mounted actuators, for instance, or finally, you can give this command as well to a DALI gateway, and this DALI gateway finally gives the trigger, gives the dimming commands to the reasonable light with the reasonable ballasts. So you can control both, nevertheless. So and again, what if we put all these together, we merge all these together as a single solution to one solution together. So that's finally the highly efficient solution. So you can discover here, so according to the current brightness, the blinds remain open. So when it comes here to the heating control, so if the room temperature meets the brightness thresholds, is exceeded as well, and nobody is present anymore, so the shading control is activated but open. Yeah. If a room comes occupied, sun tracking starts. Yeah. So when people come in for a conference, however, starts accordingly, so runs down, position the slats, and the room temperature controller so gives further on the commands to, for instance, heating support. But when the sun is rising or sun is changing the position, so then the slats open more and more to this maximum, because when the sun is pretty high, so you can open to 50%. So then you get finally the maximum of the daylight, and this adapts again during the entire season. However, and when you leave the room finally, so then the blinds run up in this case, or run down, however the temperature situation currently is. And again, as more people are in the room, then the CO2 value is rising, so the ventilation starts automatically, the daylight is running automatically, and so you have a maximum of energy saving, a maximum of well-being, and we finally fulfill with this solution, this powerful solution finally, all the requirements for LEED, BREEAM, EN 15232 or UK Gov, all these approaches finally with this solution. Hopefully it was interesting for you, and hope meet you next time.